Hello. If you want to get straight to the main part of the video, you can skip to the time on screen now. I'll go over a couple of things before the video in case people skip the final analysis at the end. And those things are that this video will be necessarily more speculative than previous ones of this kind that I've made, because although we have a very strong phonetic description sort of tradition in London from about the mid-1500s onwards, we don't have the same thing for the Northwest. So although there's pretty good phonetic description of the Cumbrian dialect from the 1800s, and of course we have audio recordings from after the 1800s, we don't have the same level of phonetic description by people living at the time. So I've had to rely a lot more on comparative reconstruction here. And another point that I would make is that, especially in terms of London, we can infer a lot more about pronunciation and accent than you might think. And I would really encourage you to watch the analysis at the end if it seems implausible that we could reconstruct anything about historical accents, because we really can get a lot more information out than you might expect. Although, of course, some things are basically unrecoverable with the information that we have. So one example is intonation. So while we can reconstruct the qualities of consonants and vowels quite well, the up and down of speech is, the sort of rise and fall of pitch during speech is something that we really don't have a good way of reconstructing. So for these reconstructions, I've mostly just gone with guesses based on the distribution of intonation patterns in modern dialects. Another thing I would say is that I haven't done all this reconstruction work myself. Most of the London accent stuff has been done already by people like Roger Lass. The Cumbrian accent stuff I have done more of myself. I've made more inferences. They may have been made by other people in the past, but that is something that I have sort of put work into myself. The usual disclaimer that I had to put on the last one. Of course, these are not real recordings from the time because audio recording technology didn't exist back then. Some people have suggested that I use written text from the time for this kind of thing, and the reason I don't do that is because I think that's done very well by plenty of people already, and I think there's a different kind of immersiveness that's possible if you reconstruct a normal dialogue from the time, if that reconstruction is fairly well researched. But I have been criticised for using too much of my own intuition to construct sentences and things like that. So in this case, I have tried as far as possible to lift sentences from source material and just build them into a different dialogue. So yeah, having said all of that, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoy it.
Where'd you come from exactly then?
I was born in Cumberland, but it's now Cumbria because they moved the county boundaries in the 1970s.
And where's that? Sort of north?
Northwest.
Northwest.
The very northwest, actually, in the corner, a few miles from the Scottish border.
I see.
And you're from London, are you?
South side of central London.
Aye. Did you see much of the war, or were you?
I did. I was very young at the time. People were getting evacuated, but my mother didn't want us to get evacuated ourselves. But you hear all these stories of people going to the countryside, and all there is horses and traps and that.
Mm.
And for you, it's probably normal. But
yes,
for me, it seemed a world away from sort of what I was used to.
We had horses when we needed traction. We often used horses rather than tractors. But we had tractors,
Head tractors.
We had tractors. Sorry.
Oh, head tractors. Did you have gas lamps?
We had tilly lamp sort of things. And we had electricity after a while. It just wasn't first thing on our priority list, Did you have electricity the whole time?
Oh, from when I was a child, we did. Not right from the very. I can remember not having electricity, but from a very small child. It was ever so good when it came in.
Where were you from then?
Fra the north, fra Cumberland. And yourself?
Aye?
You come from the south, do you?
Oh, from London, that's right. Have you been to London?
No. My wife went once.
Your wife did?
She hated it.
Oh, she did?
No, she went by car about 10 years ago. It was The only time she's been in a motor car, she's not been in a motor car other than that.
Well, we see motor cars all the time, but we don't go in them.
You've never been in one?
I've never been in one. I've scratched them by accident, mind you, but it ain't an accident from their point of view. I think it's all part of how they see themselves.
Aye.
If they ain't got the big house and the big shiny car, they think it says something about them.
Ah, well, people have cars back in Cumberland tend to have the same point of view. You start to think if they lost their house and they lost their money, that'd be tend on them.
Eh? Do what?
It'd be the death of them.
Maybe they're not so different from south to north after all. What are you doing here? As the man said when he see the ghost.
What am I doing here?
That's what I said.
Not so much. Something to paint.
Something to paint.
Paint a yall. You've strong yall here, I'll give you that.
Beer.
Beer, aye. We got yall over Macatock. Where I'm from, we call it yall. Call it yall.
Where are you from? You Scotch?
Not Scots. Not Scots. As Fred don't got bearded.
Who give you that beer?
A man gave me it and then went out.
I'm so thirsty as I could drink an old cup of that. Might I have some of yours?
Aye, you can have a bitek. Aye.
I can.
Aye, no but a bitek though.
Thank you. I've been working all day and they don't give us hardly anything.
What do you want them to give you beer?
Beg your pardon?
What do you want? Would you want them to give you beer?
Oh, well, I wouldn't turn it away.
They come a good way off. Pardon me?
As they come a long way off?
Oh yes, from London.
Yeah, sick a long gate. Has they been walking?
Woken?
Has they been ganging with their legs?
Oh no, on horseback.
Ah. Is God outside?
I beg your pardon, I don't understand.
Is it gold?
Is it gold?
Brr. Gold?
Oh, not in this season, no.
Whatever flick.
I don't understand.
Would they have a flat fish? You want a salt fish?
A fish? To eat?
Aye.
Oh, thank you. Do you call it a fluke?
Flick.
Flick.
Aye. Flick. Do you have a local name for this?
That?
Yes.
We got an ask.
An ask.
That we call water ask.
Ah.
Aye. And pray what is it called? A newt?
Yes, newt. How do you go about counting to 10 here?
What count till 10?
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And do?
We say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Both the same. Both the same. Oh, but thou says 1, but I say Jan.
I noticed that too. Jan.
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 I reckon we are straight.
That may be.
Aye.
Oh no.
Who's the gun?
Very well. I'd wondered what you farm here.
What is the farm here?
Yes.
We farm sheep, cow, other big amaxy things.
Have you any dogs?
Aye, with sheepdogs.
Have you horses?
Aye, we had a little ferret and
You had a ferret.
Aye, we had.
Did it die?
Aye, a glad came down and fanged it.
Fanged it?
Aye, aye. The glad had it was a long while after that.
Ah. Does it still come down?
Near. I killed it.
You killed it?
Aye, shot it, aye. A sheep did, and he wet it, and he shot it once it came down.
You have a bow?
Aye, you have a bow.
Ah. Good evening.
Good evening.
Shall I lodge with you this night?
As welcome.
And shall you follow the horse?
With Aver? Give it like Aver.
Oats?
Aye, what's?
Aye, it love oats. It love oats.
Nah, it's 11 then.
And let me bed be mad at 7 o'clock.
We's making out the bed.
Very well.
Gang to bed when it please.
I bid you good night.
Good night. Oh, what's the horse name?
The horse, William.
Why, what a daft name for a horse.
What shoulder man name a horse?
Nah, not, but you sold the cow with William. Pray, why do you not keep the sheep enclosed?
So to me.
why do you not keep them enclosed?
Ja, they needn't have been so they can look after themselves.
Do they not run away?
Nee, they do not. They do not run away.
They're sur.
It's what?
Sur.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Do they eat ferns?
The what?
Do they eat ferns?
Eat the ferns? Nee, nee. They'll be well sick.
Ah. Where did the dog go?
Je talks if creaky twice. Where did the dog gang? When where you the dog? I've stopped at 1586 because any further back than that and you start to get into the Great Vowel Shift, which is, you know, the broad strokes of the Great Vowel Shift in the south are almost kind of a settled issue at this point, although there's still some room for debate. But in the north, it's still something that people aren't completely sure about. I have my own theories, but any suggestion I presented would be incomplete, and I don't want to put that in a video that has the potential to become kind of popular because of the subject matter, although it might not become popular. So I've left that out just to avoid advancing anything that turns out to be a fringe theory of mine. I'm going to focus mostly on the Northern English aspects of that dialogue in this analysis because I've done a lot on Southern English in other videos which I can link in the description. And I'll start with impressionistic things that I anticipate people might comment based on comments on previous videos. So the first one is that Northern English becomes very difficult to understand. Am I in focus? Yes, sorry for that break in the flow of speech. The first is that Northern English becomes very difficult to understand very quickly. And this is realistic because if you listen to Orton Dialect survey recordings from the 1950s and 60s in Cumbria and in other parts of Northern England, you find that from the perspective of a Southern English speaker or an American English speaker, they become very difficult to understand very quickly.
This Friday night we were drawing, we were getting badly away with the walking. It was down 4 o'clock and Jack was sitting beside me and I know what had with the rubber at readers. So Jack did something wrong and he asked me for rubber and I gave him it and he rubbed this thing out to make it right and it wasn't but a long lad did something wrong. And I asked Jack for rubber back and he said he hadn't it.
Another impressionistic, there's a blackbird that I think is trying to make its nest and it's not very happy with me being here. Okay, it's gone now. Another impressionistic thing is that the further back in time you go, the more similar to each other Northern and Southern English or Cumbrian and London English seem to get to each other. So very early modern Southern English kind of resembles Northern English a bit more than you might expect. And there are some kind of concrete reasons for this. It's not just that older Southern English kind of sounds foreign, so we lump it in with other dialects we don't understand. One of those concrete reasons is that the foot-strut split, I prefer to call it the put-cut split, hadn't happened yet in the south at that point. So put and cut still rhymed with each other, and you can see this in rhyming evidence and various other lines of evidence. And those two words still rhyme with each other in Northern English today. The put-cut split never happened in Northern English, although it did happen in Scottish English and Scots, interestingly. So that lack of a put-cut split in Southern English lends to it being more kind of northern sounding to a modern ear. There's also no trap-bath split in the south at that point, so the vowel in trap is the same as the vowel in bath. They're both something like ah at this point. Trap, bath, whether you're in the north or the south. And one final thing I think is the fact that a trilled R, ra, is described by phoneticians in London English in the 1600s, and this is the kind of R that you now find in a lot of dialects of Scottish English, and a tapped R, era, and very occasionally a trilled R, ra, are found in very conservative, far Northern English dialects nowadays as well. Rhoticity is another thing, so if you said the word bar in isolation, B-A-R, in early, very, very early modern Southern English, you get something like bar or bar, and you get pretty much the same thing in Northern English because this consonant, this consonant at the end of a word still exists in Southern English, whereas nowadays in Southern English you just have the consonant and the vowel b, r when you say that word in isolation, because Southern English is now what's called non-rhotic. So the r consonant is only pronounced when a vowel comes straight afterwards. That's another reason that it might kind of sound more similar to Scottish or Northern English. Another impressionistic point is that Northern English seems to stay the same for longer. It doesn't seem to change as much over the period that I've shown here. And part of the reason for that is probably just because to most viewers it will be more alien, it will sound more foreign, and so our ears don't do as well making sound distinctions in foreign accents than in our native accent. This is an ability that we have when we're very young children to make very fine sound distinctions in other languages, but as we grow up we lose that ability, except in our native language where we stay very sensitive to those differences in sounds. So the fact that you're probably, all of us are probably just worse at making sound distinctions in languages that sound foreign, mean that you don't notice the changes as much in Northern English because it sounds a bit more incomprehensible to start off with. Although there are a lot of ways in which it's conservative. Like I said, it doesn't have the put-cut split, so that's a way in which it's conservative. Now on to some aspects of pronunciation. In order to understand historical systems of pronunciation, linguists need to understand modern systems of pronunciation and how they work. This quadrilateral represents the vowel space. It very abstractly represents the space inside the mouth that you can move your tongue to produce certain vowels. The angled line at the front roughly represents the front of the mouth near the teeth, and the straight line at the back roughly represents the back of the mouth near the throat. But this also represents acoustic vowel space because, again, you can move your tongue around the inside of your mouth to create different shaped channels that produce different vowels when air is blown through them. Along the bottom of the vowel space, it's possible to make a spectrum of sounds all the way from a to a to a to r. If you're a speaker of a language that doesn't distinguish between any of these vowels, it might be kind of hard to tell the difference between them. But if you're a speaker of English or German or something like that, you probably can hear the differences. You'll notice that in the southern recordings, I've gone with the modern tradition of having a front and not quite lowest but still fairly low trap vowel, so something like a. And this patterns with conservative Cockney and RP dialects today, and also with American dialects, South African and Australian dialects. On the other hand, for the north, I've gone with a low central quality like a. And again, this patterns with modern Northern English accents, which tend to have a low central quality for this trap vowel. The only point at which this changes is in the very earliest recordings, when the Southern English speaker all of a sudden starts using a low central quality as well, a. And that makes Southern English sound a lot more like Northern English. So why have I made this decision to take this a quality all the way back to the 1600s and then start using the a quality in Southern English? Well, the fact that Southern English speakers use a front quality at all, and nowadays it can be slightly lower, so mine is a, but a seems to be historically the most common one, is probably because within our short vowel system we have 6 short lax vowels, the vowels that are pronounced for the shortest amount of time, and these are a, e, o, and a. But in Northern English there are only 5 short lax vowels, a, e, o, u. Because the put and cut vowels, which are separate in the south, are one and the same vowel in the north. They're both u. One thing that phoneticians know about modern languages is that vowel systems want to stay fairly symmetrical and spaced out. Individual vowel qualities want to be as far from each other as possible because they don't want to get confused with each other in speech. This is something that happens naturally, and although languages don't tend to have perfectly symmetrical vowel systems, there is a high degree of symmetry that's, more than you would expect from just chance alone. In the Southern English short lax vowel system, which has 6 short lax vowels, it makes sense for the 2 low vowels to be at the front and back of the vowel space as far away from each other as possible. And in the Northern English system with only 5 short lax vowels, it makes sense for the only low vowel to be in the centre of the vowel space, because these are the configurations that provide the most distance between vowels in each respective system. In Southern English we have evidence for this a quality going all the way back to the 1600s. This is written descriptive evidence. People compare it to the German a vowel, which is low and central, and they say that it's different from that. And a Scottish writer compares the Southern English trap vowel to the sound made by a sheep, And he also says that it's closer to e than it is to a. He compares it to the Greek letter eta rather than the Greek letter alpha. Bear in mind, in Scotland, a low central quality still tends to be used today. Evidence of the put-cut split also appears in the 1600s, so it would make sense that this split, which caused there to be all of a sudden two low vowels in Southern English, would cause the two vowels to shoot to the front and back of the vowel space to produce as much distance between themselves as possible. This is why I've reconstructed things in this way, both Southern and Northern English having a at first, and then Southern English gaining this front a quality, because I think this is the most parsimonious explanation, and I think it's the one that fits best with our understanding of modern phonological systems. Another thing that we have a fairly good idea of is the fact that in Northern English, words like nicht and sicht still had a short vowel I and this sh consonant until relatively recently. So the fact that in the south we still, well, in standard English spelling, we still spell words like night and sight with this GH, strongly suggest, and there are other things that suggest this as well, that at some point these words were pronounced with an extra consonant, something like nicht and sicht. And as far as we can reconstruct, in Middle English, in both the south and the north, you had these pronunciations like nicht, sicht, bricht. Now, in the south of England, what seems to have happened, and it's a bit more complicated than this, different lects had different courses of development, but what seems to have happened in general is that this sh sound has disappeared, the short vowel I has lengthened to compensate, so it's become E, and then as these vowels have gone through what's called the Great Vowel Shift, which happened between around sort of 1350 and 1650, this long E vowel, wherever it occurred, in whatever word it occurred, becomes something like A, nate, sate, and then eventually this A diversifies into the price vowel as it appears in modern dialects. In my dialect, it's I. Now, in Northern English and Scots, you find cognates of night and sight style words with this GH that don't have the price vowel but have the fleece vowel, neat, seat. This suggests that by the time they lost the sh sound and this compensatory lengthening of the vowel happened, the Great Vowel Shift had already completed and it was no longer what we call productive, it was no longer having an effect on vowels. So this E vowel that comes out the end of the loss of this sh consonant doesn't get affected by the Great Vowel Shift because it's already happened, and it stays as a long E, the fleece vowel. There's some written evidence for this as well, so there's evidence in Cumbrian, I think from Dickinson, I'll put a note on screen if I'm wrong, that says, even within memory of his description of Cumbrian being written, some speakers have still pronounced this sh consonant. And Alexander Ellis's 1889 survey of English dialects shows that in the very northeast of Cumbria, or what's now Cumbria, what was then Cumberland, there was just about still some persistence of this sh consonant in words like night and sight, nicht and sicht. Although across the border in Scotland, it seems to have been prevalent all the way from southern to northern Scotland in Ellis's time. I'll probably put some more stuff in some slides at the end so you can read through it, because I realise this is now getting quite long. But I'll go over some things that we can't confidently reconstruct in historical stages of Northern English, but that I've had to kind of take a bit of an educated guess at here. Just because it's, I can't just leave a gap where a certain sound is because we don't know. So one of those things is that in the south of England, the consonants p, t, k are aspirated in a lot of positions in a word, which means they're released with a burst of air. P, t, k. Whereas in traditional Northern English and Scots, you find much less aspirated, sometimes completely unaspirated plosives. B, d, g, in all positions in a word. Because this is so common in Scots and in Northern English, the oldest recordings of Northern English that we have, I have made these consonants unaspirated throughout, with maybe some, not completely unaspirated, there's some aspiration at times, but largely a lot less aspirated than they are in the southern dialect. So if you compare the word 10 in both dialects, 10, den, Again, this is an educated guess based on the distribution of these sounds in audio recordable dialects of the last sort of 100 years or so.
Dames, bass when they lie down, sometimes catches the knees on them.
Another thing is this ingressive way of saying yes, this hi, which you hear in some of the recordings, and this is something that occurs at least in northeastern Cumbria nowadays, and among quite old speakers, and it's also recorded in the Autumn Dialect Survey again in northeastern Cumbria. So I think because this kind of ingressive way of saying yes when back channeling, when feeding back to someone that you're listening to them, exists today in parts of Cumbria and also exists in parts of, I think, Scotland, definitely parts of Ireland and Scandinavia. I thought that there was a good chance that it was a kind of old feature that some speakers used and some speakers didn't. So, again, educated guess, but I put that one in just to sort of give it a bit of colour. I have an email address in my About section in case anybody wants to sort of approach me for if you're doing kind of a project or a film or something that requires this kind of thing. I may well not have time. I randomly don't have time for things, so apologies if I say this and then end up not having time. But I'll try to be more responsive with my emails because I know I've been quite bad at it in the past. But in any case, I hope everyone feels that they've learnt something, and if not, then I'm sorry. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon if you're a subscriber, and if not, then enjoy your travels.